During the ongoing pandemic, India has witnessed millions of labor force just abandoning the metro cities and going back to their roots. On the face of it, it did look like a planned reverse migration, but that's far from reality. Once the workers realized that the company, the organization that they were working for, the state, the civil society, all of them have abdicated their collective responsibility, the exodus began. Workers with their meagre belonging started crowding the bus stands and railway stations in the hope that some arrangement will be made by some authorities for their transportation. Many started just walking thousands of miles, forming a trail for others to follow. This was eerily similar to the trails that are formed by the refugees fleeing a war zone or a war-torn state like Syria, a case in point. Yet, many were wandering totally bewildered and aimless in the hope of a rescue like many confused animals in the Masai Mara reserve during their annual migration ritual. Many experts, as usual, have analyzed this unfortunate migration caused by the pandemic and have pontificated why this happened and what measures are needed to be taken to avoid the recurrence. Yet, in the second wave, we are seeing the same phenomenon again. And this has compelled me to examine this issue from a completely different ontological perspective, studying insect behavior using principles of Stigmergy and nudge. I believe that behavior economics can not only explain such a behavior, but can also give clues to avoid such large-scale reverse migration. In this presentation, I would give few pointers to the organizations and the civil society, how they can improve the psychological ambience of the establishments where these workers work, so that in such a crisis situations, workers do not abandon the workplace and flee to their villages. But first, let me explain the term trail. What do I mean by trail? Anyone who has wandered into any thick forest for a quick shortcut to the main road will have realized that there exist several trails on which many would have stepped in the past. How these trails are formed? Safe to presume that initially no one knew about these trails. Someone would have gone exploring the forest in search of a shorter route. While doing so, his feet would have crushed the leaves, plants, etc. The vegetation would have been destroyed, but the footsteps over the leaves must have left a mark to denote someone else, that earlier someone has traversed on this path. Over a period of time, when many followed the trail, a path indicating the shortest route has emerged. In this process, one will notice the emergence of several paths, some shorter, while others long-winded. These are the results of several explorations by travelers in search of the shortest route. But soon the most traveled pathway becomes distinctly visible, while the once less traveled again disappears in the bushes. A sort of collective intelligence has been developed about the route, while in reality no one actually knew the shortest route. To put it differently, a totally unplanned exploration in which members had no prior knowledge, no interpersonal communication, except following the footprints, are able to achieve the goal of reaching the main road through the trail shortcut. It is as if by magic a new route, a new protocol has been opened. What appears to be magical is a way of life for several insects in the animal world. Ants use a chemical called pheromones, which are left behind for them to follow in search of food. Once the food source is located, the ants leave back strong pheromones for others to follow. and a trail is opened up from the nest to the food source. When there is no food, the pheromone dries up and the trail gets disappeared exactly in the same way the trail not used by humans and that which gets disappeared in the thick vegetation. In this process, another thing happens, of course, without any planning. The shortest route from the food to the nest gets developed thanks to the strong traces of pheromones. What is common in both the above instances is that there appears no central guidance or control. There is no pre-existing map to make the task easier. Everything is happening through a sort of local behavior which results in a collective intelligence. But this has happened due to the desire in the first instance to find the shortcut in the main road, and in the second instance to get the food to the nest. This nudge or hint is a critical element for development of critical intelligence. Imagine 4 writers have been nudged to develop an outline about a storyline. No one knows what the other has in mind while developing their own outline except a hint. Then the outlines are shared with each other, that is a human pheromone, so to say. Based on the respective themes, a collective story emerges about which they were totally ignorant in the beginning. This is classic nudge and Stigmergy in action. Stigmergy comprises a mechanism that in collective terms leads to the appearance of a map made by all of the agents involved, and trails emerge. They are not the result of a previous plan or any order or any kind of intentional act. Each ant really does nothing more than act on her own limited local scale without ever perceiving the map that appears as a result. But although each individual lacks this capacity, the colony seems to act as a whole. This is so much the case that the swarm can be seen as an independent entity, a higher level of life, possessing a collective intelligence. Let us examine the interplay between nudge and Stigmergy in more details. Both are mechanisms of prompting individual behavior or collection action via the environment. In Stigmergy, unknown to others, each member leaves behind a trail which is picked up by others, and a sort of collective plan of action materializes. Let me spend a second on Stigmergy. Stigmergy is a concept of coordination that I shall employ to analyze human practice in complex work settings. However, the concept of Stigmergy was not originally developed in order to describe human practice. Rather, it was developed within the field of entomology, that is, the study of social insects. Nudging, on the other hand, provides a choice that encourages a desirable action from a set of alternate behavior pattern. In this sense, it is a controlled and to some extent, if I may use the word, a manipulated intervention. The folks at the Amsterdam airport, just to elaborate the point, had a problem in their hand to keep the airport toilets clean. Often men using the toilets made the floor dirty by peeing all over the place. Not aiming in the right direction was the probable cause. What was the solution? One obvious and direct approach would be to post a message asking men to keep the washroom clean. But what they did was something unusual. They etched a picture of a fly in the urinal, and surprise of surprises, men started aiming at the fly, and no more the floor was dirty. The cleaning bill went down by 80%. This is a classic nudge in real life application. In my trip to Singapore, I noticed that all washrooms at Changi International Airport had flies etched in the urinal pots. Behavior modification happens when men have something to aim at, and in this case it happens to be the fly. The principle of nudging has its root in behavioral economics, and it has great relevance to the issue of reverse migration. Instead of a direct message, which is often in the way organizations are managed, if we nudge the workers in an indirect manner, it is more likely to be internalized and accepted. The principle underlying the way we act and behave depends on what is now known as the dual thought process theory. We normally operate from two mindsets. The first one is fast, automatic, and emotional, almost like a reflex action. And the second one is slow, deliberate, and logical. The first one is non-cognitive, the second one is cognitive. A writer has compared the first one to a famous bumbling Homer Simpson, and the second one to the equally famous Spock of the Star Trek. Now the point here is that we meet more of Simpsons in the world than the Spocks. That's besides the point. And that means that our strategy for modifying the behavior pattern has to consider nudging than direct command or direct instructions. It is all revolving around the choice architecture. Our training is often very direct, regimented, and forced. Can we make it indirect and with subtle nudge that touches and excites the non-cognitive aspects of our personality? Let me give more everyday examples to stress the point. In India, we have this tendency of throwing garbage outside the house. The assumption is that if it is outside my house, I am okay. One approach would be to levy fine on littering and posing messages that littering is prohibited. Now, if we supply the garbage bag with the name of the house owner written on it, what would happen? Just think. I am sure suddenly people would become responsible and take the bag to the bin. Second example would be of eating more than necessary. If people are not conscious of how much they are eating, if we replace the big plate with a smaller one, automatically they will eat less. The third example would be of a small child that messes up its room with all the playthings spread all over. One direct way would be to reprimand the child and order him or her to tidy up his room. We all know that this will be met with stiff resistance or a cry. Instead, if we nudge the child and if we play the tidy game with the child, I am sure the child will enjoy and actively participate in cleaning up the room. The Montessori system has understood this principle very well. Let me return to Stigmergy and explain how it works in our work settings. Let me take an example of building partition walls in a building project to highlight the practical application of Stigmergy. In the interior construction stage of a large building project, a considerable number of partition walls are constructed. Partition walls are what divide the building into, for instance, units of office space. The construction of these walls is a cooperative work process involving a number of different trades such as carpenters, electricians, and painters. The initial parts of a partition wall is constructed by a carpenter in the form of a frame made of lightweight steel grinders fitted with the plaster boards on the one side. At a later point in time, another actor, namely an electrician, will arrive and pay heed to the work carried out and seek to align the wiring of the electrical circuits with it. That is, the electrician will drill holes in the plasterboard to accommodate the electrical installations, and he or she will pull electrical cables through the little holes in the vertical steel grinders of the frame and connect them to the electrical system as a whole. When the electrician is done and has left the scene, the carpenter returns to close the wall, that is, to clad the second side of the wall in plasterboards in accordance with the previous work done. That is, the carpenter must take notice of the work previously performed by himself and the electrician as he seeks to put up the second round of plasterboards. Subsequently, the painter shows up to paint what others have erected. At this point, the wall in the making will have been worked onto consist of a steel frame, plasterboards on the first side, electrical installations inside, and plasterboards on the second side. Finding the wall in this state, the painter paints the wall with several coats of paint. In this manner, the work ensemble, including carpenter, electrician, and painter, all make distinct contributions towards the construction of the wall in accordance with the respective areas of expertise. We could say that the individual actor creates and changes the form of the wall in the making, not for the purpose of conveying a message, but simply as part of performing their individually allotted tasks. In turn, another actor pays heed to and acts upon the material evidence of the work of others. This is partly how cooperative and interdependent work tasks pertaining to the construction of partition walls are integrated through practice of Stigmergy. To conclude, the argument that I would like to advance is this: for bringing about behavior modification, complete centralized control is counterproductive. In an organization, it is not necessary that every employee need to know its central mission well. It actually will be counterproductive, as I said before. At the same time, leaving everything to the employee is also not a wise strategy. What is needed is a centralized hint about the goal, about the objective, and creating a stigmergic environment in which members explore the options and follow the trail to reach the goal. The self-learning not only motivates the individual, but it also encourages group activity that results in achieving the goal much faster with greater satisfaction, in addition to helping retention and stopping the migration. The Japanese understood it quite early in the 80s, and they started this game by introducing quality circles and small group activities. It is time for us to go beyond and behind the obvious. Thank you.